again, everyone. Welcome to the Calimesa Insider Podcast. I am Will Kolbow, City Manager for the City of Calimesa, and we have a lot to get to this week, so I'm going to get right into it. So the main topic of today's conversation will be government finances, and I was going to go in a certain direction today, and then there was news that broke just yesterday that I think needs to be included in the conversation, so I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But first, I want to recap what has been a very, very busy week here in the City of Calimesa, and for me personally. So this past Saturday, of course, we had our Christmas parade. The Calimesa Chamber of Commerce hosted the Get Your Lights On parade on Saturday along Calimesa Boulevard, and this is only my third time doing this parade, and I think it's about the 8th or 9th time overall. But the turnout was amazing. From all accounts, it was the largest turnout that this parade has ever had. And so it was so much fun to be a part of it and to participate in it. So I was glad to see so many people out there. I didn't get anybody to have a sign that you listen to the podcast, but that's okay. But I still enjoyed myself. Only one of my kids was able to be on the float with my wife and I. The other two, as your kids get older, they're teenagers. They have their own thing, but at least I had one of my boys there to spend time with us on the float and run the snow machine. We were in the very first float, if you were there, and it was a really good time. So I was glad to participate in it, and the chamber, as usual, did an outstanding job with that. So thank you to them, and thank you to our city staff too for all that they did to help prepare, get the streets closed down, help with cleanup, and actively participating in the parade. So it's much appreciated all around. Tuesday was a very busy day for me. I appeared on the UKIPA 360 podcast alongside Joe Turner, who is the host of City Manager Unfiltered. He calls it the most influential podcast for covering local government. And that show will drop this coming Tuesday. And they're going to make the audio available to me to post on our podcast feed here. So I'll drop that sometime during the holidays as a special episode. So I'm going to record next week, and then I'm going to take a couple of weeks off for the holidays, and then we're going to hit it hard for the podcast in 2025. But that will drop as a special episode, my appearance on that show. It was a great time. We had a really good conversation about what city managers do and whatnot. So like I said, great time, and I think it's going to be a lot of good content. So if you don't subscribe to UKIPA 360, you probably should. They have good information. It's a video podcast as well, so you'll get to see my mug. I always say I have a face for radio. Hopefully my parents aren't listening. They'll shudder at the thought, but I do believe I have the face for radio. So that's why this is an audio. That's one of the reasons this is audio podcast only. Also, the cost of producing video is more, so it takes more time and effort and equipment and things like that. So. And then after that appearance on UKIPA 360, we had our swearing in ceremony on Tuesday night. Newly elected council members Eric Cundiff and Eric Garcia took the oath of office alongside re-elected Linda Molina, and then later Linda Molina was selected as the mayor of Calimesa, and Jeff Cervantes was selected as mayor pro tem. So again, and also Wendy Hewitt, are now a former council member, did open the meeting as mayor pro tem. Mayor Bill Davis was not in attendance that night, and just very gracious in welcoming everybody, and she was very excited about the turnout and just had a lot of nice things to say. When we gave her thanks for her 4 years of service to the city of Calimesa, the job, I've always said, a lot of people, especially city council members, tell me, I'd never want to do your job. Your job seems so difficult, and in a lot of ways it is. But I would never want to do their job either. Being an elected official, there's a lot of pressure for that, and you're signing up for it. You're volunteering. You're volunteering to put yourself in the crossfire of public sentiment and things like that, and representing your community. And there's a lot of nobility in that, but there's also a lot of challenges in that because. One of the things that, we get challenged with a lot in government is, people don't come to City Hall just to tell us we're doing a great job. If people are happy about things and they don't have anything to really get angry about, they usually don't come. We usually don't hear from them. We don't see them. I do hope that even people that do think we're doing a good job overall, I don't think anybody's going to think we're perfect or anything like that. I'm sure there's things that they like to see better. There's things I'd like to see better too. I think we all feel that way. And hopefully they're listening to the podcast and engaging that way. But, for the most part, when we hear from people, it's to complain about something, and they're not happy with us for, one thing or the other. So, that's part of the job though, right? And that's what you sign up for, and you're trying to do the best you can. And, and it's a lot of challenges, and you're going to, some decisions you make are going to anger people. You're never going to make everybody happy all the time. And so it's a very difficult position, a very difficult job. And can be, you get a lot of things in praise sometimes, but other times you get a lot of hatred. And so you have to be able to put up with all of that. So, I think that's something that, both council members Cundiff and Garcia are going to learn, that you're not always going to be popular, but you're always going to try, hopefully do the best you can in that role and understand what, you're trying to do and bring to the community and as far as policy goes. So I wish the best of luck to our new council members and to Councilmember Belina in her new position as mayor, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Jeff Cervantes. So good luck to all of them. And of course, John Manley is still on the council as well. He just has another 2 years left on his term. And so I look forward to working with all of them. And then yesterday morning at Tuckwit Canyon Golf Club, I took part in a city manager forum hosted by the Pass Economic Development Alliance, or EDA. And that was interesting. It's always interesting to sit down with my fellow city managers. So it was the 4 cities in the Pass, Yucaipa, Calimesa, Beaumont and Banning, and also the cities of Hemet and San Jacinto. So the 6 city managers, well, 5. Elizabeth Gibbs from Beaumont is out on vacation this week, so she had her community development director pitch in for her and presented for on behalf of the city of Beaumont. So it's always nice to get out in front of groups like that to talk about what we're doing and some of the challenges we're facing as well, and how I think that the business community can really help us in those endeavors and come together with solutions to not only celebrate what we're doing and all the things we're trying to do for the community, but also how we can serve the community better. So it was nice to get together with my fellow city managers and present about all we're doing. And you always learn something too. You learn from some of the initiatives that they're doing. All of them are bigger cities than we are, and so they have more resources, more money. And so there may be things that they can do that maybe we're not quite there yet, but it's something to definitely keep in our back pocket for as we grow, how we can try to take some of those ideas and make them our own here in Calimesa. So it's always good to participate in stuff like that. So coming up, we have a council meeting this coming Monday. A couple of consent items that I want to point out. We do have our annual audited financial statements. They're on the consent calendar as a receive and file item, but that does contain a lot of good information. Sometimes the actual financial statements are a little bit more difficult to read because, the way the accounting standards require you to present certain things and how it reads can be a little bit complex sometimes. And so, obviously it's still good disclosure, but it does lend itself to sometimes having some confusion. So this is for our fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. And that'll actually play into something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show when I talk about government finances. So it is, interesting timing that the audit will be on our agenda this coming Monday, given the topic I was going to cover anyway. We also have a contract for economic development advisory services. And again, this is something that's really important, I think, for the city moving forward. This particular service is going to basically analyze our local and regional market, see where our opportunities are, and then take a look at the sites that we have available, our empty sites, our vacant sites that may be conducive to certain uses that in the market that are needed in our region. And again, we're limited by, sometimes by our population and our topography and things like that and our potential for growth. And also the community's appetite for growth. I think that's an important thing too. Some businesses look in developing in a certain place, and if there's a big anti-growth movement, it may make them hesitant because they're not going to be able to grow their customer base possibly as much as they'd like to or they need to. And so there is some, kind of leap of faith going into a community. Not only am I going to capture the customers that exist today, but I also want to capture the customers that are going to exist in the future that aren't here already. And so, and growth, obviously, and how you grow and your land use decisions play a big part in that. And so, that is something that businesses certainly look at. But we're using this as a time to kind of establish what our market is, what is the best type of use that's going to be successful for growth in our community. And when I talk about growth, I mean like economic growth and making sure that it's something that sometimes you may have something that's the best for economic growth, but there's other qualitative factors that the community doesn't want that type of use for whatever reason, regardless of what the market says. And so then that you can use that to make decisions. Okay, we're going to give up this opportunity because we want to keep things a certain way, but understanding that leads to maybe not having as much resources to do some of the other things that you want to do, such as increase public safety, more parks and trails and things and road repairs and things like that. So, but having that information first and helping you and having that as another data point to make decisions, I think is helpful. And that's what this is going to be about. Then future strategy, then that can be used to establish our economic development strategy and how we can market certain properties and how we can reach out to the marketplace and brokers and things like that to bring people to our community. So once that contract is approved, assuming it's approved by the council, then obviously we'll be able to pursue those things. We will have a second reading of our fire ordinances that were presented at the December 2nd meeting. There was a clarification on barbecues. So there was a discrepancy whether it was 15 or 50 feet from structures. It is 15. So we normally would have a second reading just on consent, but because we are having this clarification, we're putting on regular business so we can make sure that everyone understands what's actually being approved as the final resolution or as the final ordinance. So that's why that's there. And then, of course, the big item is going to be the appointment of commissioners. So with the newly elected folks, including Linda Molina, who's reelected, the terms of their appointments run concurrent. So Mayor Molina, Councilmember Cundiff, and Councilmember Garcia will make their selections for the Planning Commission, Library Commission, and the Parks, Trails, and Community Services Commission. And so the applications for all those that we had received up to the agenda deadline are available on the agenda packet on our website. And then Mayor Molina will make her appointments to all of our regional boards like WRCOG, RCTC, RCA, RTA, and also council subcommittees like our Budget and Finance Committee, our Mesa Verde Ad Hoc Committee, our Sheriff Services Ad Hoc Committee, all of those. So she makes those appointments on Monday night as well. All right, so the main topic that I wanted to talk about today, and we're going to take some time to talk about this because it is kind of a fascinating subject. And my original intent was to talk about the new California Policy Center dashboard that they came out with. It's called the Local Fiscal Health Dashboard, and it was meant to replace the fiscal health dashboard that was prepared by the California State Auditor up through 2022. That has now since been removed from their website. And so the California Policy Center is basically stepping in to try to continue that work. But before I get to that, news broke just yesterday about the commutation by President Biden of a woman by the name of Rita Crundwell. Now, government finance officials, or at least most of them, should know this name. And if they don't, there are resources. And even if you're not a local government finance official, you certainly should learn more about this. Rita Crundwell was the comptroller for the city of Dixon, Illinois. And she was arrested in 2012 and accused, and she pleaded guilty to, embezzlement of over $53 million over a 20-year period. Now, about half of that money was stolen just in the last few years of her fraud before she got caught. She was sentenced to 20 years, almost 20 years in prison in 2013. But yesterday, as part of I think about 1,300 people were granted some kind of clemency, either a pardon or a commutation of their sentences. So the difference between a pardon and a commutation is, a pardon is not only are you let out of prison, but that basically the crime is wiped from your record as if it never happened. A commutation is that the crime that you committed still stays on the record, and it doesn't expunge the sentence that you had, but it basically says you're now free going forward. So whatever you served, you've completed your sentence and you're free to go. But you still have that on your record, so it doesn't expunge your record. So those are the difference between a commutation and a pardon. So, you think of a pardon sometimes as being, in the most benign cases. Now, there's nothing benign about somebody being wrongly accused of a crime, but if it is found that someone was, if it looks like, yes, this person was wrongly accused of a crime, or there was an error in the sentencing or something like that, or there was an error in how it was prosecuted or whatever, then you see a pardon. That's usually the most, the thing that people go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But other times they can be quite controversial. And I'm not here to talk about the politics of it. But in this particular case, reading this news was very, very unsettling for me. As someone that works not only as a city manager now, but has worked in government finance previously, it is very, very disturbing that this woman is getting freed from her prison sentence. To me, if it were up to me, this woman would have never had another day of freedom in her life. And maybe it's because I'm biased because I work in the industry and it's something I really care about, and trust is something that I really care about. And it's something that I take seriously. And the thing that I take more seriously than my number one attribute in anybody that works in government is that you should be doing the right thing when no one's looking. The thought of a prison sentence or consequences or a punishment should not be what deters you. That to me is not a quality of somebody that I want working for me in government. I want somebody that it's not because of the punishment that they don't commit a crime or don't do the right thing. I want it to, because that's just who they are, and that's what they do. And that's the way I see it. It's not even a religious thing. It's not like, will God punish me? I'm not worried about that. That to me is also not relevant. What's relevant is I just feel the right thing to do is the right thing to do. I mean, and sometimes it's not the popular thing, but I certainly believe in doing the right thing. And so there was a article on this. I'm going to post the article that talked about her commutation. I'm going to post a link to YouTube that has the full documentary that was done on her crime. And there's also a podcast series, if you want to listen to it that way. It was season 3 of Crooked City, the Crooked City podcast, that covered this in detail. And it talks about what she did, and unfortunately how she got away with it for so long and how she got caught. And it's pretty fascinating, and it's a little bit scary. And it underscores the importance of internal controls. A lot of times when cities face budget issues, or they want to do more with their tax money, they want to do more services, more initiatives, things like that. Unfortunately, some of the times, the things that get cut are administration. People like, oh, why are we paying so much to the finance department or city manager or whatever? And we want to either cut their pay or eliminate them. We don't need them. And Dixon, in the case of Dixon, they didn't even have a city manager. They actually had the 5 elected city commissioners. They each oversaw certain departments, and that's how they ran things. After this, they did go to the council manager form of government, which is what we use here in Calimesa, which the vast majority of cities of California use, because the only qualification, and that's not to say that, the people that are running for office aren't competent, accomplished people. But, there's a lot of ins and outs in government and how to manage things, what the rules are and things like that, and understanding, internal controls and finance and all that kind of thing. And so, the 5 commissioners as a group were found to be accountable for that, and they should have known that. They should have seen it coming, and they didn't. And that might partially because they don't have the expertise in finance and accounting and auditing to be able to see the signs. And that's not through no fault of their own. That's not what they chose to do with their lives. They do something else. Maybe they are an engineer or a contractor or a nurse or a teacher or whatever. They're doing something else with their lives that they're experts in. And now all of a sudden you're going to have them in charge of all these different these municipal functions. Finance to me is a gatekeeper in that if you have a good finance department and you have good, in this case, it was the person in the finance department, but she had way too much control. And that's why separation of duties is such an important thing. In this case, she was able to establish an account that looked like a legit bank account, but it wasn't. And then submit fake invoices that she approved herself. And then she paid made the payment on. No one ever saw it. And and everyone trusted her, but she had complete control over everything. And no matter how much you trust somebody, having complete control over everything is not, it doesn't work. So like in Calimesa, for example, all of our checks require 2 signatures, all of them. Doesn't matter what the dollar amount is. Those are the kind of things, and they require multiple approvals. A lot of times our invoices go through 3 different people, and then we have 2 signatures on top of that. So you have up to 4 or 5 different people seeing these, all these invoices. So in Dixon, that simply wasn't the case. You had one person kind of do, it was a one-person show. And so that sometimes is the result of that. And it's disheartening when somebody that does something like that so egregious is, let out early, because that punishment doesn't fit the crime then to me. And it's, she victimized 15,000 people. That's a town of 15,000 people. Victimized them from, they were taking out debt and to pay for things, and their financial situation was always poor. And that's where, maybe I can go to the next topic, which is this dashboard. Sometimes financial struggles can reveal maybe some things that aren't right, and maybe deserves a little bit more of a closer look. One of the things we've talked about and we're very proud of was with the California State Auditor, when they had the fiscal health dashboard. Calimesa was ranked number 1 for a while there. Now, the California Policy Center, their rankings are done a little bit differently, and their scoring is a little bit different. So we're ranked number 54 out of 414 cities for the fiscal year 2023. The 414 cities that had data. There are actually 483 cities in California, but there's probably, I guess that means there's about 70 that didn't have financial statements ready for 2023. And remember, I mentioned earlier, our council will be considering our audits for 2024. There's some cities that are behind on their audits, they're behind on their bank statements. That's a red flag, because then not only is it maybe, it may be vulnerable to fraud because of that, but also you don't have a good idea of what your finances are, and therefore, there's some things that you're going to miss out on, or there may be underlying problems that you're not able to identify in a timely manner. So we're very, very good with keeping up our bank statements and our bank reconciliations. That's a very important internal control. And like I said, we have separation of duties in our finances, so that no one person can make decisions that would be incompatible with other decisions. And that's very, very important. Like, for example, our finance director, she does the bank recs, but she doesn't sign checks. She doesn't sign any checks at all. She's not a signatory on her accounts. She can initiate transfers to LAIF and transfers back and forth from LAIF to our bank account, but it can only go to our Bank of America checking account. And that's it. There's only one place that money can go. It can't just leave to some other, account somewhere else. And so we have everything set up so everything has to have multiple reviews in order to, again, minimize fraud. You're never going to prevent it 100%. And if someone tells you that they have a way to prevent fraud 100%, they're lying to you. There's no way you can do that. But you can take steps to minimize your risk of fraud. And that's something that I take very, very seriously, especially being a former finance professional. So they rate you in a number of different areas. They rate you in general fund reserves, debt burden, liquidity, revenue trends, pension costs, pension funding, pension obligations, and then OPEB obligations, which our city does not have, and net worth. So let's go through each of the categories real quick. So the general funds, this measure, they score this out of 15, and so all these scores are added up, and they're out of 100. So we have an A rating. Our fiscal strength is overall is 88 out of 100. So that's our score, and that is considered an A in their rankings here. So we get a B in general fund reserves, 12 out of 15. It measures how much funds the government has at its disposal to quickly address any liabilities that arise without a renewed appropriation of funds. These reserves are for emergencies, not regular spending. Now, the ratio is a little bit low, and it's a little artificially low because our general fund expenditures for 2023 are a little bit high. And the reason they are is because that's when we took possession of our ladder truck. So the timing of the funds to get the ladder truck and then spend it on the ladder truck came in, the timing was off, so it kind of crossed over fiscal years. So it artificially inflated our general fund expenditures. So I do expect that ratio to actually improve when the 2024 numbers come out. Our debt burden is a 15 out of 15. It measures the government's obligations relative to its revenues, and we scored a perfect score there. We got a perfect score in liquidity. That measures the degree to which governments have access to liquid assets to cover any immediate cash outflow. Liquid assets consist of cash equivalents, and short-term investments that can be readily converted into cash, and that is a purely accounting term. Revenue trends were a 5 out of 5. It measures the average growth rate of revenues over the last 3 years. So we got a 5 out of 5 of that on that. On pension costs, this isn't one that people pay attention to a lot. And we got a 4.8 out of 5, which is an A rating. This measures the fraction of the revenues that is consumed to fund pension obligations, and thus the fiscal burden that pension costs exert. And our pension actuarially determined contributions ratio is 0.01, which is very, very low. Basically, our pension actuarial required contribution was $194,000 out of government-wide revenues of $26.8 million. So very, very good. Pension funding, the portion of the pension liability which is covered by pension assets and investments, we have a 77% funding ratio, so that's considered a B. Pension obligations, we got 9.56 out of 10. This measures the net pension obligations relative to the government's annual government-wide revenues. And so we had a pension liability of $1.2 million, and that's, again, a long-term liability, which fluctuates as well because of assets, out of revenue of $26.8 million. So that's a pension obligation ratio of 4%. And then net worth, finally, we scored a 10 out of 15, 10.02 out of 15. And this rates the size of a government's unrestricted net position relative to the annual government-wide revenues. So that is, those are the different categories. And if you add all those up, we got to a score of 88. So let's look at what some of the cities around us looked like. Let's start with Yucaipa. Yucaipa scored pretty well. And this is interesting because remember, they just passed a sales tax measure, which I'll talk about in a moment, not their sales tax in particular, but more in general. They got an 84 out of 100. Their general fund reserves are considered healthy at 13.05 out of 15. Their debt burden is 15 out of 15. Their liquidity is 10 out of 10. The revenue trends were rated a little bit low, a C, which was 3.18 out of 5. Their pension costs are good at 4.49 out of 5, and their pension funding is good at 3.95 out of 5. Pension obligations, 8.82 out of 10. OPEB obligations, 9.58 out of 10. And then OPEB funding, 0 out of 5. So this one's interesting because and they consider that an F because it's a 0. But this is because of this measurement of OPEB. Some governments do offer most governments, I should say. And Calimesa is not one of them, I will point out. But most governments have some form of medical, ongoing medical at retirement. But most cities, the way it works is if you are a member of CalPERS Health, you are required to provide some kind of contribution at retirement. And usually the contribution, I think right now, the minimum required by CalPERS is about $150 a month. So once somebody retires, you have to provide them $150 a month towards paying for medical costs. Now, of course, most plans are much, much higher than that, right? So it's a very minimal contribution. And so their total OPEB liability is $2.3 million. And again, that is a very long-term, actual determined number of some liability that people have earned that's going to have to be paid out in the future. And I've never really fully agreed with how this is calculated and the emphasis put on it in situations like this where you have this what's called the PEMCA minimum. The amount of money that the city of Yucaipa is probably paying on this is probably only about $30,000-$40,000 a year for all of their retiree health care, which isn't a significant number. But there are cities that basically said, we're going to pay for your medical for life. That used to be a thing. Now, a lot of cities have gone away from that, especially after the Great Recession. A lot of cities eliminated that program, or at least for new employees. They didn't take it away from existing employees, but new employees were not eligible for that. And so you're going to start to slowly see that come down. But there are some cities that had a significant liability, like the city of Stockton, for the example, when they declared bankruptcy. But in the case of Yucaipa, I think it's a little bit unfair to give them 0 out of 5 in most cities in this case because of how, because it's 0, I mean, is it really good to put aside assets into an OPEB fund? Because like I said, it's just it doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of cases to do that. It doesn't make much financial sense to just put money away for a cost that is relatively small and isn't going to grow a lot over time. So I don't know. I just never agree with that. And lastly, so let's go back to this. Their net worth was 11.67 out of 15, or a B. So again, they were scored at 84 out of 100. They're number 96 out of 414. City of Beaumont came in at 68 out of 100, which is also an interesting one because of their big spike in revenue. I do expect that this number probably will change over time. They do have quite a bit of debt, which I was not aware of. They have $163 million in long-term obligations. So that is a little bit high. And there may be some. So the other thing too, and there's some of these things where the reporting on it may not be fully reflective of what's actually happening because of how certain governments may report things. And I've seen some examples of that. So some of these numbers are artificially low, in my opinion. And so, this is a data point, but it shouldn't be something you're setting policy on. You probably need to look into it a little bit more closely before you make any decisions based on this information. And I say that also because City of Banning, they are 51 out of 100, so they're ranked number 406 out of 414. Again, I think that there's a little bit of it's kind of a little misleading on some of this stuff. But, again, it's just, information that you can then look at. In terms of the top cities in the state, top 5, 2 of them, or actually 3 of them, are right here in Riverside County, interestingly enough. Coming in at number 1 was the city of Eastvale. They had a perfect 100. They scored 100 out of 100 for fiscal strength. The city of Danville up north was tied with the city of Indian Wells. Each had 98 out of 100. Laguna Woods came in fourth place at 97, and tied with them was Rancho Mirage and the city of Dublin. So Rancho Mirage, Indian Wells, both very wealthy, low desert cities. So it's not too surprising to see them on this list. But overall, I'm happy with where we're at. We're still looking very healthy fiscally. And that's something we want to continue to have, because a lot of cities, have challenges. And that's why cities like Yucaipa had Measure S, which passed, which added a 1 cent sales tax which will start, I believe, April 1st. But they certainly weren't alone. There were many other cities in the state. As a matter of fact, there were 103 cities that had a sales tax on the ballot. And out of those 103, let me see. Let's see here. 95 of them, I should say, had a general sales tax, which is what Yucaipa's was. And 81 of those 95 measures passed. So it was a good year, if you want to put it that way, for local governments to pass these new laws or these new measures. And so, some of them were continuations of existing taxes. Some were new, like in the case of Yucaipa. And so you think about 103 cities. There's only 483 cities in the state, and this is just one election. It's not like cities do this every single election. And so it is interesting that that's the case. And I could probably do a whole series of podcasts. I did kind of scratch the surface a little bit back in my episodes where I did that four-part special on realities back in July. And if you haven't listened to that, I suggest you do so. But it is interesting that, a lot of this has been a trend in the state. And if you actually understand how local taxes work, not talking about federal or state, if you understand how local taxes work and how they developed over the last 40 or 50 years, some of this actually does make some sense. And like I said, we can have a whole discussion on that. As a matter of fact, one of my ideas is to do a kind of a road show to talk about taxes and how your taxes are generated and where they go at the local level, and how little of your taxes actually go for local services. Because people say, oh, I pay all this money in taxes. Yeah, from the federal and state, you do your income taxes and things like that. Local governments don't see a dime of that. And that's the vast majority of the taxes that you pay, especially in California. So, I think it's something that we can look at, and I think it's something we should explore more closely. But there you go. That'll do it for this week's episode. The next city council meeting is Monday, December 16th, this coming Monday at 6 p.m. at the Norton Young Love Senior Center. You can attend in person or watch on the city's YouTube page by going to calimesa.gov/YouTube, then clicking on the live tab. If you have a subject that you want me to cover on the podcast that I haven't covered yet, or you want me to elaborate on or give an update on, please let me know. Reach out, email me at calimesainsider@gmail.com, or my city email address is wkolbow, KOLBOW, at calimesa.gov. We're going to wrap up 2024. We're going to have one more episode this year with a special year-end review, so that might be a long episode as well. But until then, this is the Calimesa Insider Podcast. I am Will Kolbow, and I will talk to you again next week. Have a great weekend.